All right, welcome everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Startup Fuckup. Today, I have a very exciting guest to talk about a very exciting topic as well. So we have Tanya from Australia joining us to talk about the topic of recruitment fuckups. So before we jump ahead of ourselves, I know there's a lot of stories because people problems are always the juiciest. Tanya, I'd love to have you share and tell us a bit more about yourself because I strongly believe in what I call value-based decision making. So I hope that through having our audience understand a bit more about you, your personal values, and kind of what informs your decision, that will also help them kind of put into context some of the lessons, some of the decisions that you make as you navigate with some of your clients and some of the problems you may personally have faced in some of the stories that we'll talk about.
Awesome. Well, it's good morning from the sunny Gold Coast here, even though it's nighttime for you, Chen. So thanks so much for having me on today.
Yeah, Tanya, do tell us a bit more about yourself. Tell us more about kind of what brought you to where you are today, and what are your personal values? What kind of drives you?
Yeah, okay. And I'll try and keep it brief. So my background is 15 years in recruitment, and I'm based in Queensland. At the moment, we look after all permanent roles nationally and roles internationally as well. So my company is called Recruitment Corp, and I sit as the CEO. I guess in terms of values, there is a big conversation or rolling conversations at the moment of how we really align ourselves to the people that we work with and people that we surround ourselves with. And I guess my kind of main mantra really is I would like to engage with people in any scenario and come away from that interaction having learned something from them, but also hopefully giving them something or some insight that will impact them positively. So I guess values for me, I've got two kids, I've got strong family ties, but also I think just being really transparent and authentic in every interaction. Obviously, where appropriate for business owners and managers when delivering information to people that they work with. But I think just trying to be, and it sounds cheesy, but trying to be your true self, essentially.
Thanks for sharing. That really resonates with me because authenticity is one of my personal values as well.
Yeah.
Maybe tell us a bit more about Recruit Core. How far along is it? What kind of clients do you typically work with?
Yeah. So it's been open for 3 years. So prior to that, I managed another recruitment company. So I've been in business for about 10. Now, really, and we always talk about what type of roles do we recruit for? And I'm sure around the world, headhunters, recruiters, they all kind of follow loosely the same thing. They're specialists in a particular field. Whereas for us, we're generalists. So we're recruitment specialists. We're not specific to industry. So when we're looking at, I guess, clients that we want to engage with, they're people that really align to us. So people that understand the importance of onboarding and retention, but also people that are probably similar to us because it makes it fun, right, to work with great clients. So we pretty much recruit roles at all level, but definitely more in that permanent space. So we don't do temporary or contract. And that can range anywhere from professional services, to mining and resources and construction. So it's quite varied, but I guess I do maintain it's very much about that client alignment. So we look for that transparent and authentic approach with our clients too.
Great, thanks for sharing. So before we jump into the topic, because recruitment and I find HR issues there's just so much to talk about. As a good friend of mine who's in HR said, messy people are messy. There's a lot of stuff that happens.
Yeah.
I love for you to set some context with some stories. Do you have any examples? Do you have any specific stories that can help us frame some of those lessons in a real life situation that you can share?
Yeah. Look, I think there's so many. I did having done it for such a long time, my PR manager pulled my stats together. So I think I've done about 8,000 interviews, obviously filled 3,000 to 4,000 roles because I did start off in a temp capacity. More recently, we've had, I guess, candidates that are coming into the market, perhaps off the back of COVID, that aren't really, I guess, prepared for interview. One of the girls that I was training in interview recently, I kind of left her to it to kind of roll through the interview via video. And the lady had her pet bird on her shoulder throughout the whole interview. So that was really interesting. And I guess for me, after hearing that, I had to obviously be quite PC, but I guess when candidates are applying for roles, it's probably, understanding that the interview needs to be professional and not having your pet bird on your shoulder, because that tends to, throw people off as well. In terms of, I guess, probably earlier on in my career, when I ran the temp desk, there was certainly interesting stories about people turning up to work drunk. I had to, when you do temp work, you have to fire people because they essentially work for you. So I had a scenario where I had to let someone go from a call center, and I helped him pack up his desk, and he's like, I'm just going to go to the bathroom. And then he went to the bathroom, came out with no pants on, and ran around the office. And he was like, I'm out, fuckheads, and then left.
Oh my goodness.
So as you can imagine, I had to really manage that client and their expectations for the next person.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious. Those are very unique examples. Some of them are, I would say, more on the candidate side of the picture. Are there things that a company can do to mitigate those things from happening? Is it, better communication or
Yeah, and I think too, it's and look, from a client side as well, and these are clients that I'm not working with anymore, but from a client side as well, like, you have quite inappropriate clients that perhaps don't have a formal structure in terms of interviewing. They're quite inappropriate in what they're looking for in a job brief too. So there is a lot of talk at the moment around recruitment being largely run through AI platforms, which I'm kind of on the side of disagreeing, because we have people that might not feel comfortable doing video, might not feel comfortable, or might not have the access to the technology to be able to do video interviews to a bot essentially. And I guess to mitigate risk, really, I talk about this all the time, really understanding the role that you need, the role that you want, and making it personable, because people spend a lot of time prepping for interviews or applying for roles. They're nervous. So if the manager, or I guess the company, isn't prepared for interview, it can impact. But also know your strengths too. If you don't have the experience to recruit, engage with a recruiter or get someone in your hiring team that actually knows how to do it. So it all starts at the beginning. What does the role look like? What it is that you're essentially recruiting for, and what's the onboarding process, right through as well.
Mm. And what does this look like in context? Have you had clients where you've given them candidates and they, like, how does the interview process go if they don't prepare well? What might that look like?
Really, so our process, because we've done it for such a long time, it's quite seamless. So our role is not to sell a company candidates. Our role is to buy you time, essentially. So our particular process is we like to meet with clients face to face, get an understanding of who they are, if they align with us, but also to see their company or their building or their office, because I can't explain to a candidate what kind of role it is if I haven't actually been there myself. I find recruiters at the moment are a little bit slack, where they're just taking job briefs over the phone. So when we deal with clients, we set an expectation, and it is okay if clients aren't ready, I guess, to recruit, or they don't know how to. That's where the professionals that help them with that. But I guess the process for us, really, to summarize, we headhunt, we'll interview a candidate twice. We usually present 4 to 5 resumes to a client and make suggestions based on, what they need. And typically the people we send, it might be just on brief. It might be someone that is more junior but has a great attitude, or it might be someone senior that has been where they want to go. And then on the candidate side, we prep them before the interview, giving them all the information for the client. And from a client side, we outline any areas of concern, or, for example, there's been a lot of movement here and overseas in the last 3 years because people have lost jobs. So it's a partnership role. So we spend a lot of time really educating the clients and also the candidates on what the role is, what the company is like, and what to expect. And then after we place someone, we're pretty much there, we're long cycle sales. So we're there for like the whole journey. So I have clients that were candidates 10 years ago. So it's quite thorough, our process. And I think it differs a little bit to other agencies.
I'm curious to get you to dive a bit deeper on the topic of alignment. So we've talked a bit about that, and it sounds like you also help your clients with the interview process itself.
Yeah.
How do you define alignment, number one? And then number two, how do you screen for it?
In terms of alignment, I would prefer to work with people that are similar to us. And by that, I mean, people who are transparent, that are open to learning. I'm at this point now in my role where I actually like not knowing things because I like to be wrong. I like to be challenged. And with clients, it's very much finding that out from them, what is it that drives them? Are they comfortable being guided by someone like myself? And in terms of vetting them, it's that face-to-face meeting. Do they arrive on time? Are they prepared? Are they open to feedback? How do they view, their team? Like some business owners, I feel for them because I am one, but they're running around. They might not think that recruitment's very important. They might just treat their staff badly, and they're the clients that we don't want as well. So it's quite thorough, the initial process.
On that note, since we are talking about kind of alignment, I'm curious to get you to I'd love to hear you elaborate on how you view companies viewing what they call quote unquote culture fit. So obviously values is a piece of that. What else falls under the umbrella of company culture?
I think I was interviewing someone this morning, and they're in a position where the culture isn't great. And by that, I mean, the manager that they have isn't in the right role, or they don't know how to manage. So it's important that you have managers that are able to interact with different types of people. But everyone wants progress, whether it is a little bit or a lot. They need to see, that career advancement. And that might just be learning a new project. It might be, training or getting mentored by someone that's senior in the company as well. So when we kind of look at that culture fit, it's not just fun, ping pong tables and drinks on Friday. People can do that socially, and they can do that with people that they work with outside of work. Do we have a really open environment where we can communicate at every level and we can engage? And are the leadership, do the leadership team feel open to receiving that feedback as well? So it's not just all about fun. It's about, having that two-way communication too.
Interesting. Sounds like communication is a big part of that. In and around that, beyond kind of the culture fit, how can companies avoid falling into that groupthink kind of situation? Like, what would you say is kind of a good balance between culture fit versus culture add?
For me personally, I feel that everyone should be really open to a obviously an inclusive culture as well, but for my team, every person that I bring into my team, I want them to bring something to add to our culture. So culture fit really with clients is, people that, own their role, are accountable, understand their role and what they need to do and how they contribute. But then having that, I think clients probably struggle, or companies struggle to understand that you should also be open to people bringing their own flavor as well.
Mhm.
And bringing something different. Like my whole team's very multicultural. Like everyone has a background from another country here. And I love that because we have days where we'll do, different cooking things, and everyone brings something from, from their home town or where they're from. So I think from a culture fit, you have to have something, obviously your morals and your code and your values, and that's what you stick to.
Mm.
But I think in terms of building that culture, that's also important to interview or hire people that could bring something different as well.
Mm. Yeah, that's good to hear. I think it resonates with some of the advice I've heard in the past as well,
Yeah.
where having that diversity, obviously, you're looking for people who think differently, but at the same time, if they're all on different pages, then it's hard to agree on anything. So having that alignment on in and around purpose, mission, and values, that helps people understand, like, okay, what are we aiming towards, moving towards, and kind of how do we make decisions in the team as well.
Oh, and I think it's very much having that kind of like we kind of run our team like a football team, so we're all in it together for the same goal. Not
Mhm.
one role can, survive or do really well without all the other roles. So it's that collaborative approach too.
Mhm, mhm. One interesting quote that I remember, and a HR professional that I connected with, that worked for this company called D-Wave, what she would
Mm,
say is they would hire for cognitive diversity. So that's
yeah.
what they were looking for. It's more about people who think different, and naturally the kind of superficial metrics of diversity in and around things like race, gender, sexual
Preference.
orient
Yeah.
preferences, those kind of things will naturally fall into place if you create an inclusive culture and if you are actively selecting for people who think differently.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. Like and I was talking to a client yesterday, it was a new client, and he's like, Tan, I just want good humans. Which is a great brief, right? Like people that probably can be vulnerable too. I think that's another thing with leaders. They struggle to be vulnerable because they think that it's a weakness, and it's not. But it's, yeah, definitely that inclusive culture and having a safe environment where you are free to learn too.
Mm. Um, I'm curious to get your take on more on the, I'd say, soft skill or more personality type of screening
Mm,
methods and frameworks. And the reason why I say that is I find generally for most organizations, screening out for hard skills is pretty straightforward.
yeah.
We've seen that a lot of organizations in this day and age are starting to become more aware of the importance of clarity around the company purpose and company values. But I
Mm.
think because it's still kind of a growing trend, a lot of them don't quite know how to properly identify if someone is truly passionate about the cause or the purpose, or if they're just saying the things to get
Just
the job
because,
kind of thing, right?
yeah.
So yeah, do you have any kind of advice around how to tease that out from a candidate?
Yeah, yeah. So because I like learning from my team, and we had I've got a book where I ask clients questions around how they first started their business because I'm just curious generally. And then I have, a blue book where I ask candidates, the best kind of company they've worked for and things like that. But I did say to the team last year, I feel like our interview questions are a bit stale. Let's make them really fun. We can still make them pointed and get the outcome that we want, but ask a few things differently. So I guess right at the beginning of our interviews, we ask certain things. So I might say, what famous person would you want to have lunch with, alive or past, and why? And that brings out really cool stuff. Like there was a guy that he said, he was from the army, and he was like, there was this army leader that was just brilliant, and he's not, well known, but he was in the army for 20 years. He did all these amazing things when he went overseas.
Mm,
And he was very, collaborative, and he really helped his team. And that leads into what type of manager do you aspire to be, or what
mm,
type of manager do you, or person that you look up to. So, and then we
mm,
kind of ask things like, how do you spend your spare time? Describe a fun team event that you went on and why was it fun? How do you balance productivity with fun? What would you do if you're in a situation where two colleagues were arguing? And we ask these questions because it creates this narrative around that person, because we're storytellers. Everyone is. You are, people that are running their business, they're selling their story, and they're trying to get their name out there from a marketing perspective. So when we look at culture fit, we have to be quite creative in how to find that. So, tell me about a manager that got the best out of you. What did they do? Describe to me in 3 words how your colleagues would describe you, and then tell me 3 words of how your friends would describe you, and tell me 3 words of how your partner would describe you in certain situations. So if you really know your role well, or if you really know, I guess, the company for recruiters or people out there that are looking to hire, you can pull those things out. Like those icebreakers right at the beginning, they're golden, because I ended up sending that candidate to a client of mine that came from a defense background. And if I hadn't asked that, he probably wouldn't have gotten an interview, because immediately my client was like, Tan, yep, I love guys that are from the defense. They just have a different mindset. So that's how you find that match too. I think questions like, what are your hobbies and things like that, it's just a bit stale. You want to find out, like, what was the last book you read? When was the last time you took a risk and what happened? Like, those are the questions that we ask. And I would say to people, just be really creative with your answers. And I also prep the candidates too, but be creative with your questions as well. Yeah,
no, good advice. To kind of put that into a bit more of a framework, I guess, for our listeners. Some of those questions fall under the category of what we call situational questions. Those are kind of what ifs, problem solving. Tell me how you would deal with this kind of situation kind of questions. And then on the other side of the picture, we also have what we call behavioral questions. So these are more like, tell me about a time when this happened kind of thing. Tell me about how you dealt with this situation, what came out of it kind of thing. And the main difference, as I've learned as well, and probably Tanya, you can elaborate on this too, is situational is good for problem solving and kind of understanding how they troubleshoot. And then the behavioral questions are better indicative of how they would actually perform, because it's easy to say what you should do or would do versus what you would actually do, and kind of what outcomes come out of it, and how you reflect on them as well.
Yeah, and I think, like, in terms of those situational things, so we have a question and we say, is it better to have done something perfectly or a week late? Or is it better to have done it satisfactory and on time? Now, the answer really is quite long. So you don't want someone that is crippled by perfection, particularly in, emergency services. You don't have time to wait a week for something to be done perfectly, because it's quite reactive. But at the same time, satisfactory is, and a lot of clients like that satisfactory level, but the answer really is, well, the way that I work, for accountants, like, I start doing end of month 2 weeks beforehand, because I don't want to be working later. I don't want to be working to a tight deadline. Another thing in terms of problem solving, or pulling out how they work. If you had 200 emails and you could only action 20, how would you go through that process? What would you do? And how would you, respond to the urgent ones? And what time frame would you do that in? So, and I would say to people that are going for interviews, if your interviewer is asking you for a specific example of a time where you did something, don't fluff it. Don't be like, oh, in my other roles I've done this. They're looking for a specific example. That's the key to that question. It's not necessarily about the example. It's whether you're listening to the question they're asking. So, and I would say, if people feel stumped or nervous, just be like, look, I'll have a think about that. Do you mind if we come back to that question? And I'll answer that once I think of, the better answer is to have examples before you go in for interview. But interviews can go so many different ways. You just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, I think that's very sound advice, giving the candidates the space and letting candidates know it's okay to think about an answer instead of just trying to
Mhm.
jump to everything that but by kind of talking about what comes to mind immediately kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um Another thing I heard kind of in between the lines as well with what you were sharing is not only asking the right questions, but also having the person conducting the interview understanding what to listen for, kind of listening for the right things as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and one example that comes to mind for me as well is as an example, let's say if a company is screening for people who are, let's say, care about the environment, if that's one of their
Mhm.
core values, if you just ask someone, tell me about what you do in and around volunteering for the community or for the environment. And if one
Mm.
person says like, oh yeah, I volunteer for this organization, I do this, some weekends. And then if someone else says like, oh, I'm on the board of this organization, and I frequently donate to this, and I often come out and volunteer as well. Both of them give positive answers, but one is likely more passionate about that topic than the other. And it's not to say
Yeah.
that one is wrong or right, but just understanding what you want in terms of what you're listening for, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Right. Um, Kind of on the flip side of recruitment, I guess, is the topic of retention. So,
Mm.
you bring on board people and then you engage, you try to keep them. I've seen some companies kind of not approach retention with the right kind of framework and mindset. Um, do you have any examples of like bad retention stories or um, you know,
Yeah,
yeah.
it always happens, because we're there through the whole cycle, or the whole journey of the candidate, and that's important for us too to see how they progress as well. We really try and help our clients and support them around the retention piece, but retention starts with right before the interview, again, like what kind of role it is that you're looking for your company,
Mm,
and then setting the expectations. So, on your first day, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen in your first week. This is what's going to happen in your first month, and vice versa. And I
mm,
think what does happen is people struggle to commit to that. They're so busy getting staff in. And then once they're in there, oh, just hit the ground running. People can't be retained that way. And in 15 years, like I very rarely hear I want more money. They want, again, going back to that progress thing, they want to be able to see the progress, but also don't have a scenario where you hire someone, sell them the dream and then don't onboard them.
mm,
More recently, I interviewed a girl and she was looking for a marketing coordinator role. And she interviewed with this company, and it wasn't us, it was another company on the Gold Coast. And they sold her this dream and said, hey, yep, there's a bit of admin, but you'll mainly be doing marketing. And when she got there, she was doing a receptionist role,
mm,
because someone had recently left and she'd done that before. So they kind of just put her in that role. And for candidates, that's very confusing for them, but also
mm,
it's stressful. They've quit their job where they were probably comfortable. They've gone to a role with a company, and the role is not what they said it was going to be.
mhm,
So, it's a bit of a mess at the moment, I think. Like managers are very much overworked, and business owners are stressed.
mm,
But I guess I would just maintain that strong communication. If you're not prepared, obviously get help to be prepared. And if you're working with a recruiter, they should prepare you too. But also just say to, the new staff member, hey, it's a little bit busy at the moment. I'd like you to shadow me for a week. And these are probably the key things that I want you to hit in the first quarter.
mhm,
But we do move very quickly. So please come and talk to me if you're feeling like you're not engaged. So I always say to the guys here, don't come to me in 3 months with a problem that I could have fixed back then.
mhm,
Um, be very open with me, and you kind of tell me where you feel like you're struggling so we can act on it really quickly.
mm. I like that. So making
Mm.
sure that you're kind of staying true to kind of the onboarding experience and also making it okay to raise issues and have that clear communication.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. The related to that as well is kind of, I would say, making sure that you address the motivations of your employees, as opposed to just focusing on your own or the organization's motivations as well. I often see that as a mistake where a company is saying like, oh, you know what, we're changing in this pace, we're changing in this quarter, we're moving towards this, therefore we're going to change your role into this kind of role. And sometimes the employees, they might actually want something else, or there might be someone else who might want that kind of role, and they don't move the right people into the right kind of roles as well.
Yeah, and I think from a candidate side too, or an employee side, be honest where your weaknesses are as well. I had a lady 2 weeks ago that applied for an accounting role, and we got her an interview with a client, and she actually said, she was like, I actually lied on my resume. I don't have all those skills. And I was like, okay, well, that was a bit odd. But I think just being really honest with where you struggle, because clients are, off the back of the last 3 years, they're firing fast and hiring slow. And that's always something that I suggest anyway. But being that the economy is getting a little bit tighter, companies are not willing to, I guess, not spend as much time on people, but they expect that if you're coming into a role and you're saying you can do what you can do, you should be doing it. And you should be honest around your strengths and when you need help as well.
When would you say is, related to the topic of letting people go, since you mentioned firing fast, when is kind of the right, sorry, it's a bit of a vague question, but are there indicators that tell you if someone should be let go versus, trying to retain them for the sake of retaining?
Yeah, I think like for me, when people work with us, I always say, look, it will take 12 months to understand why we do what we do, and for our skills and your skills to kind of come together. Probation periods in Australia are 3 and 6 months, so you can't, the probation only extends to 6 months. But I think to answer your question, it starts at the interview. So are they turning up on time? Are they responsive? At work, are they turning up on time? Are they sitting on their phone? Are there a lot of appointments that they're going to, when they have said an interview, that they're really reliable? Are they, I guess, committing to the workload that you've given them, and are they tracking to the training timeframes? As well. So I think those are the key things, but it's hard because some managers, and even myself, I'm very competent. So I have to also meet people where they're at too. But you usually know in the first 1 to 3 months if they're going to be suitable. But again, it's very reliant on the onboarding process too. Are they set up for success? Do they have all the tools that they can? But it's honestly like, for the firing fast thing, if they are not aligned with the person that they, if they're not the person that they were in interview and they were just a really good salesperson at selling themselves, you do find out fairly quickly. But I would suggest to companies, if they do have people that are there, it's probably better to let them go sooner rather than later. I had this conversation on Instagram yesterday where I was saying, the cost of a bad hire, it exceeds 200,000 because it's reputational damage. It's the person that's training, they're not doing their core role, so they're spending time training this person. It's impact on culture. So if you have a toxic person in your team, 4 people might quit, and then you have to backfill those roles, maybe pay a recruiter. It's a lot of money. So it's being really true to what you want out of the role, but it's also from a candidate side, again, like I said before, maintaining, that level of openness and that communication around where you are struggling.
Yeah. I really like those insights. Another one that I kind of can throw in there as well is recently I've also been listening to Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, and he talks about this framework where he calls it the Jedi tours of duty. So the analogy he uses is a lot of organizations, beyond kind of performance-based and kind of behavioral-based issues, some organizations, they try too hard to retain for the sake of the retention numbers. And he talks about how there are different tours of duty that people will go through in different phases of their life. So the ones he talked about is there's the foundational. These are the people who are out there to do something big. They care a lot about the purpose, the mission, and they're kind of going to be the core foundation of both your company's culture, but also maybe even the co-founding team as well. And then he talks about transformational people being the second category. So these are people who maybe they have a specific career goal, like maybe they want to become a VP of sales, or they want to become an operations director, and they see your company as an opportunity for them to gain the experience to eventually move up the ladder in that direction, whether or not it be with you in that role or with another organization in the role, and ensuring that managers both empower their employees to achieve their sort of career goals, and be comfortable with letting them go if they have to, in order to help support them kind of move towards those goals if they are obviously a good fit. And not just trying to retain them for the sake of retaining them. But yeah, if it's the right time to let them go to help them move up in other organizations, then allowing them to do so in the capacity.
And I think it's important to know, like, it's great when we see people that have been in a role for 6 years. That's very rare. But I think, people here, they're here for a good time, not a long time, right? And when they're here, we as managers need to nurture that growth. And if they want to stay, gosh, that's amazing. Like, I'd love to have people working with me forever, but that's not the reality. And things change. People have families, or they might want to do something differently. But I think from definitely from that perspective, it's understanding that when you have people that work with you, be really present with them and help them nurture their career, but also know that they might not be there forever. And that's okay too, as long as you can teach them something, again, like what I was saying earlier, like have a really positive interaction with them, learn something from them, and hopefully they will learn something from you, and you're really adding to their skill set. And I probably would add to that too, a lot of things, and I did this years ago as well, but hiring family or friends, or becoming really close with your team to the point where it blurs a line. To sound a bit harsh, they work for you, and whilst there's a great interaction, being that my role is to headhunt people as well, they are also just there for a role which will help advance them or help them grow their skills. So I find a lot of small businesses, because I mentor for state government here with small businesses, they hire, their partner or their friend's cousin or their wife's sister or whatever it may be. And that's just dangerous long term, because it makes it difficult to let them go. That's one of the reasons why some people keep staff on for too long, and they allow, not bad behavior, but I can't think of another term, but they allow things to happen because they are friends, when it actually impacts your business.
Yeah, no, that's an important point. So not only supporting them, but making sure that they are actually delivering good value to your business, number one, not slacking off, actually performing, but also not doing bad things that shouldn't be done as well.
Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Very interesting points. Yeah, I think one last one in and around that as well is related to more transactional or temp talent, and also being comfortable with that as well, because there will be certain both roles, but also certain times in an organization where it's appropriate to bring on board kind of a short-term talent that are more mercenaries, so to speak, and not necessarily someone who is very strongly aligned with the company purpose and vision. And that's okay as well, because it depends on the company's objectives. And if that's the case, then being comfortable with that turnover if and when you do see it, because you know that you are hiring for those people for a short term as well.
Yeah, companies need to contract and expand their workforce in terms of projects and things like that too. And I would say, because I used to run a temp desk of about 120 people, and no company would ever they would make the effort to try and engage someone permanently if they were a really great fit. But temp work's difficult, and it's something that we don't really do anymore because a lot of people just kind of jump for more money in other roles, and that just creates instability. But temp is very good, is if you have a short-term project that you need help with, you still kind of, they're still employees, so you still adopt the same approach. But also, I guess, relaying that to the team too, that it is a temp assignment, or it's a project contract, so that permanent staff don't feel like there is instability in the company as well. Yeah.
Good point. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned a bit in and around sort of AI and recruitment and hiring. Since AI is kind of a hot topic right now, I'm curious to get your take on not necessarily AI per se, but mostly more around how should an organization approach the idea of sort of automation? Like what is okay to automate? What shouldn't be automated? How can you keep that human element both in the recruitment process, while at the same time also increasing efficiency as well?
Yeah, I think look, AI is difficult, like I said before, and some examples are, again, if people aren't, they don't have the technology to, I guess, do an interview, via video, where they're just essentially talking to themselves and trying to sell themselves. The other thing too is automated responses. So every CRM, even ours, we can write an actual templated response. So it's setting a time frame to, thanks so much for your application. We'll get back to you. This is what's going to happen. Someone's going to give you a call. There are some companies here that are that do automate questions, but again, it's very awkward. Like if we were having this interview and it was automated, there is no way to truly find out, each other's personalities, and it's not comfortable either. So I guess you could automate things like obviously putting up, ads. We use Seek here at the moment, but you can automate that process. I think, from a reference perspective, perhaps, an email out, but we do everything via phone or face-to-face. So I guess, not that I disagree with it, I understand efficiencies and why that's important, but hiring people are your business. It doesn't matter what business you're in, people are your business. So you should spend a lot of time there. And I guess if for larger companies, it's making sure that the hiring managers are educated too. But I kind of sit on the fence with AI because, a lot of people, particularly in trade roles, some of the best people we've hired have been dyslexic, but they can do, they can fix every machine. Like, they're amazing. They can crawl all over a mining machine and find out what the issue is. But if we had automated the process with their interview, they probably wouldn't have been successful because they're not capable in that particular skill of being able to, even pull their resume together, perhaps. Yeah. So I feel like, when you're hiring people, it should be very personal, a personal approach. And I feel like it is a bit discriminatory for people that, again, like, don't have the tools to go through an interview process through an automated system.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that perspective. It's comforting to hear, because as someone in, not necessarily in HR, I'm more on the sales side of things. There's a lot of discussion in and around automation as well for sales processes as well. And at least I'm of the mindset. It sounds like you're of the similar mindset as well, where automation is great. It helps make things a lot easier and better. But the way I view it is, you automate so that you can be more human and make the experience better, instead of automating to become less human and taking away that human element there. Like things like, let's say scheduling the interview, like that could be an automated process, so that you can spend more time interviewing people and less time, jumping back and forth trying to set up a time, kind of thing. So automating like some responses, some replies are okay in email, if it's kind of just to make people know that, to give people that transparency that yes, you have received the application, to set some expectations around like when they'll hear back, what's the next steps. Those kind of things are okay to automate, but really the interview process, like screening people, I think that should be human as well. So good to hear that.
And yeah, and even from a sales perspective too, like we run sales training with our guys, and I've had clients come in to give their perspective. You have to be in front of people, whether it's video or face to face, because if you are selling something to someone, there needs to be a trust element. So how do we build that trust if it's a generic email or it's a LinkedIn message or a text or something like that? And that's generational too. Like I think people now really struggle to engage, or they're scared to do sales, but it comes back to knowing, I guess, your own worth when you're in that sales capacity, but also understanding that clients will, they'll spend money with people that, put the time in as well.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing all of that. I think that's a good amount for us to digest. Kind of wrapping up, if our listeners are curious to learn more about you, about Recruit Core, what's the best way for them to find out?
So we're on LinkedIn. So obviously Tanya Abbey on LinkedIn, and just recruitcorp.com.au.
Great. Right. Thanks for your time.
Awesome. Thank
Definitely
you.
look forward to sharing more.
Excellent. Thanks so much.